economist and member of the Ethiopian Internet Society. Will you please come up? Jalila Magis, will you please come up? Also joining her will be Solomon Damtu, Director for Payment and Settlement Systems Directorate at the National Bank of Ethiopia. Will you please come up, Solomon? And let me also invite Teshoma Worku, Senior Director for Wingu.Africa, to please come up. And last but not least is Tilahun Melak Sitone, who's University Dean at Addis Ababa Science and Technology University. So may I invite all of these four speakers to come up on the stage, Delilah, Solomon, Teshoma, and Tilahun. We are waiting for you to come up and get our next panel started. Big round of applause, please, for each of our speakers as they come up. Jalila, Solomon, Teshome, and Tilahun. Please come up. We are looking for a moderator. Where is she? Oh, I thought that was her when she got up. Do we have Solomon here? If not, I shall step in and be the moderator for this session. My first question will be for Teshoma, which is as connectivity within Ethiopia increases, what increasing role do you see data centers play?
Okay, thank you, the moderator. I think before I answer this specific question, I just want to say something about the whole connectivity and what it matters for the general digital economy. So in a digital ecosystem, there are about three main components that has to be dealt in facilitating the digital ecosystem. As the first one is, I said, the content. The first one is, I guess it is a content, and there should be a content for that the digital ecosystem to be there. And the second one is the service. And the third one is the data, which we are going to play. And the last is somehow the physical connectivity. So within this ecosystem, what is coming to Ethiopia, as the panel says about Ethiopian connectivity? So if we are dealing about local connectivity,
Try this mic.
okay. If we are dealing about local connectivity, I think the government has been trying to facilitate the digital program, which is Digital Hire 2025. So the question comes is from the international connectivity, what we were saying. Ethiopia, by chance, is a landlocked country. And one of the challenges that we have still is just how to connect to the submarine cables, which I was saying in the question. So if we can manage that, I'm sure that things will be in a very good position. But from the internet connectivity, we have access to some neighboring countries, Djibouti, Kenya, Sudan, and everywhere. But one of the things is, if that is the case, how can we just facilitate this within an ecosystem called a data center? So that's what the question comes. In a data center is a critical and foundational part of a digital transformation or digital infrastructure. But as such, this data center requires its own connectivity to be connected somewhere in submarine cables or neighboring countries, or which is the sister data centers. Like if we come to Wingu data center, my CEO is here. He's just looking for to connect his data center from Ethiopia to Tanzania, connect from Ethiopia to Djibouti, Ethiopia to Somalia, somewhere. So the question is, or the challenge is there enough capacity to connect these data centers from the submarine cables? Are we ready? Are Ethiopia is ready to have such capacity or to access to data centers like active to active? So that is a question. So what we have to do is we need to have a kind of policy, or we need to have a kind of regulatory, and we need to have a kind of something, a support from the submarine cable sites, so as the cost might be decreased, or something to fetch out the challenges that we had still. I'm not saying only Ethiopia is a landlocked country. There are countries who can manage this in a way that international connectivity is not a problem. Like we can take Rwanda. I mean, of course, Rwanda is a very small country compared to Ethiopia. That might be manageable. But countries like Ethiopia having about 130 population is very difficult. And every time data is already produced, like imagine service directly correlates with the number of population. Connectivity directly correlates with the number of population. Data directly correlates with the number of population. So it is important to deal with Ethiopia and like other countries like Ethiopia to deal with how connectivity is important to like boosting the digital ecosystem. It's digital by boosting the digital ecosystem, meaning that the digital economy comes. The GDP of the country is just being determined by the amount of data that's requiring and the amount of infrastructure that they have. So these are the very important issues that we have to deal with. So there are some controversies that service and infrastructure, which comes first? Like maybe the infrastructure providers, they usually say there is no demand, there is no service, so I cannot have infrastructure. And the service providers, they say, oh, I need infrastructure. Without infrastructure, I cannot start the structure. It's a kind of chicken and egg. For that, there are models that has been stated in the literatures, like a kind of demand and supply strategy. The supply strategy meaning is you have to have infrastructure first and then find out the service. Or from the demand side, you have to have many demands, but you need to have infrastructure. So this is a kind of balance. In my view, from the personal point, from my personal intervention, is someone has to have first an infrastructure, then the infrastructure drives the service, and the infrastructure drives the content providers. The infrastructure drives the content developers, and the infrastructure drives all the data. So that is the way some countries are using in this way, and the other countries using the reverse way. So for a country, Ethiopia, as has been said earlier, we have a very huge gap of infrastructure, particularly the international connectivity. So that is that is that we have to resolve, in my view. Thank you.
Yeah. Shall I proceed with the same question? Okay, so my name is Delahun. I came from a university and from Tower Science and Technology University, which is one of the two specialized science and technology universities. So our focus here is working in science and technology. So connectivity is very important in education and in the context of Ethiopia. It's more important. Why? Because nowadays there are a pressing issue in quality of education that we are providing in different levels in the country, including the primary, secondary, and as well as tertiary levels. So the perspective that we do see is what does the connectivity and infrastructure will do for improving the quality of education. So there are a lot of things that it can be helpful. One of them is that it is creates like an environment where a lot of resources are being available, where, as you know, prestigious universities or global universities courses and their educations were not accessible some years ago. But due to the initiatives of this massive open online courses, nowadays they are available to almost everyone. So one of the connectivity will do to the quality of education is it will help us to access those resources, and those resources are vital, and we don't have to build from scratch rather than we can integrate them into our existing curriculums, existing contexts, and then we can use them in building even our curriculum into a context and building our syllabus. So we do practical examples where our curriculums programs are being provided to meet the national as well as the specific like local needs. And then when we are building those curriculums and syllabus, we'll try to integrate those resources so that they can be supportive, so that the educators as well as the students can also access those resources. So it's a kind of privilege, and we're trying to use those resources. Another area is what connectivity allowed us is that it allows us to access published researches because universities mandates is to conduct researches, and when we are conducting researches, usually needs to be based on a problem that exists in a society, in a local context, and that has to be new, and that has to be different from others, what others have been done. That has to be progressive, additive, and so on, right? So, in order to evaluate and check those online researches, accessibility of online databases, researches, and so on is very vital because it helps us to build our problems. It will help us to build our research projects, and it will also help us to frame and formulate those like researches in the context of making them useful to the societal problems. So that's also one aspect where the connectivity will do for us. Another area is they're conducting those researches. Usually, the next aspect is producing like product or disseminating them to the community. And one of the dissemination is publication. So connectivity allows us to publish researches and disseminate into the global community so that their impact increases and their accessibility is also increases. That creates an opportunity to create profiles of our researchers and then create also an opportunity for collaboration as well. And another thing that we are doing is that we're trying to create like joint programs and collaborative programs with local and international like institutes. And we do have typical examples. For instance, recently we are launching like an artificial intelligence program, a PhD artificial intelligence program with Ethiopian Artificial Intelligence Institute. And then we have also a nuclear program, a nuclear science program, whereas Russian institutes. So these collaborations are in products, but the process is long and the conversation will take, some time. So we don't have to always be, have set a physical meeting, rather those like processes can be facilitated whereas online, and then it can create a platform so that we can have continuous engagement in conversation for the sake of monitoring, for the sake of realizing, and so on. So we have also exchange programs that will help us to send our students abroad, and then they can get the latest we can say infrastructures and experiences from those people who are in the top of their game. So all of this can be assisted. So what we do believe is that the technology and connectivity can be assistive and helps us to realize like our ambitions as well. And then it is also very important to support as well as our administrative and other tasks as well. For instance, as you know, the the Ministry of Education of Ethiopia is highly alerted in quality of education, in conducting different kinds of exams, like for instance, there are exit exams at the end of your degrees, and there are also graduate admission tests, and there are also, so there are a lot of exams that are going on here and there. So with it of the infrastructure that we're having as one of the universities, we are conducting those exams online as well. So that will, minimize, that will increase efficiency in many ways. One, rather than, securing those exams, printing them, transporting them, there are a lot of, conflicts nowadays, and so administrating them is not easy. So in that aspect is also very helpful. Of course, there are a lot of challenges that can be mentioned. So connectivity will play an important role in higher education nowadays. But it is, as well as its impact will also increase in the near future. So we're not saying that we are using fully, but it helps us to connect, engage with similar partners that do exist globally as well as locally. So we do have a lot of cases, especially for instance, at the time of COVID, it was challenging for us. So as a university, what we try to do is trying to conduct classes online. So we didn't build courses, we didn't build contents, and then we didn't have platforms that meets the standards of e-learning. But at the time, that was a times of crisis, but we try to cope, and we try to achieve some some we can say um, tremendous effort. I mean, outcomes at the times of COVID. And after that, nowadays we're also building e-learning systems, and we'll try to integrate into our existing traditional, we can say, educational system, where we were not fully converting our educational system online or e-learning based, but we are trying to make it like a blended, where for instance, we can integrate those contents that are insightful, interesting into our contents, and then some of it is its portion can be covered online. We can invite people from industries abroad, and so on. So that kind of opportunities are possible with thereof the connectivity that we do have. So there are a number of opportunities that we can see in the education system, and as a university, we are trying to use it. Of course, we are trying to also build our systems, um, and we are trying to automate a lot of transactions in the university, and those also are very helpful. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks. We've got a quick announcement to make over here.
License plate number B76924 B sabasitis dating hara. That's okay. Gmail Rabihedu. It's good to pass it. Ligamo B76924 Addis Ababa footer. Thank you.
Okay, now we can carry on with the panel discussion. Jalala, you can move with the next question.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Talahun, for the great insight, and Tashoma too as well. So I'll ask the second round questions. I'll start with Tashoma, I'm sorry. We'll start with Tashoma. And investing in digital infrastructure is costly. And what strategies are working best to make sure these investments are sustainable and benefiting the country? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. As I said, infrastructure is a fundamental issue for anything to be connected. As my colleague was saying, they're just in a position to provide education service, e-learning or something like that. If there is no robust infrastructure online or real learning system, cannot be achievable. So fundamentally, by anyone with the government or the private sector, there need to be robust infrastructure to be in place. So the strategy maybe which might other countries might be following or have been successful is uh, everyone contributing, including the government and developmental partners. They usually just support a company or a private individual who is investing in infrastructure. So infrastructure is a capital intensive and its payback is very low if there is no dynamic service or demand system, as I said. One of the reason why uh, private companies, profit-based companies, are not engaged in infrastructure development is the payback period is very high. So it's capex intensive. Unless and otherwise, the demand is boosted by any policy means or by any like good use case whereby service industry can be flourished. It will be time taking. That's a very difficult thing. In most of them, the private sectors are not being involved in infrastructure development. And in the other way, they just prefer to be service industry. But service industry, as I said, a kind of chicken and egg, whether services flourished or infrastructure is flourished. So in my view, there should be a kind of mutual collaboration between the government, private sector, and developmental partners. So as this uh, infrastructure investment has to be managed in a collaborative way. And then once infrastructure is there, it's fundamentally true that service will be flourished or content will be flourished. Of course, others related to that will be flourished. So may not be a strategy or a policy. This is the kind of view which other countries are following. Everyone uh, involved in this digital ecosystem to be involved in infrastructure development. So unless and otherwise there is an incentive from private sector, no one will be involved in deploying infrastructure. Of course, some uh, visionary private companies might think that they will have a demand and they will in place the infrastructure. So to conclude, a collaborative engagement with all involved in this area is important to have a robust infrastructure and that's boosting the connectivity, the service industry, the data analytics, and everything else that's expected to be in the digital era. Thank you.
Thank you for highlighting some key issues. Now I'll move to Alahwa. As we know, preparing students for the digital future is important, right? So how is the education sector strengthening ICT skills and capacity in Ethiopia?
Uh, yeah, I think uh, for instance, I mean, the motto for our institute is it says it is a university for industry. So putting a motto is one thing and making it practical is another. But we believe that we are trying to make it practical. So how we do that? Uh, uh, we have uh, uh, a national level or standardized center of excellencies in Ababa Science and Technology. For instance, one of them is artificial intelligence and robotics. One of the director was here early in the morning, and then we do have high performance computing and big data, and we do have also sustainable energy. And so these are not only built for the university needs. So they have been built for meeting the national need. So if you do get a chance to, visit and see, of course, they have not been finished, they have not been equipped with the necessary equipment. So the objective is to meet the industry like needs. How that will what will happen is that those programs that we are trying to launch, especially the undergraduate programs, have been designed in a way that will meet the countries and as well as the industry needs. And then the postgraduate programs are being designed in a way that they will meet the industry needs. So we'll try to align with industries, and they do accept problems from the industries, and then there are some sorts of validations by engaging those people from we can say the industry. So uh, that actually doesn't that cannot be successful only with the engagements of or with the ambitions of one institute, but it requires a commitment from, we can say, different sectors, including the industry. So I think we can say that we are in the right track. Of course, we don't have the expected outcomes but there are engagements, and there are also researches that are going on. And then the infrastructures are being the helping us, like we said, in many ways. And one which have been built by the university, and the other the initiatives that have been conducted by other, we can say, stakeholders. So our intention is trying to optimize and using all of them. So we do have a kind of close engagement and interaction with the industries. And we do have also a program that we recreate or give scholarships for those professionals from industry. So every year we do have a call for industry so that they can send their professionals, and we try to build their capacity. So it can be done in the long run with thereof those degree programs, and as well as with thereof like short-term uh, trainings. And of course, that can be in different modalities. It can be online, it can be like blended. So some are not be online, because they do require like practical experiences and the laboratory work. So the always finding the appropriate balance is very important. And of course, we believe that we are in the right track in that aspect.
All right, thank you again. So before we move to the audience question, I would like to ask each of you to give us one final thought about this question. So for those in the audience working on the digital strategy, what would be your advice to give them?
Yeah. Uh, Actually, it's not an advice, but it's a kind of request. So those who have a chance to work in a digital strategy, I think we do ask you to strongly consider the education system, and having an idea from researchers, from some sorts of surveys and reports, what is the status quo and the status of our education system, and how we can integrate those digital like strategies, policies, and infrastructures with the education system that we do have. Because at the end of the day, we may have a very beautiful strategy or policy, but those educational systems are the one who will produce like the workforce. So it's very important to take into consideration where understanding what is the current status of the education system that we do have, and what kind of curriculums that we do have. And so we do expect those strategies and policies to be a kind of suggestive even for us, and taking an input when they're being designed. That is also my.
I don't think that there is a specific strategy to drive such a digital ecosystem. it depends on the business model of the company or an individual, and of course depends the country to the country. So as I said earlier, it's a kind of which one is first, the service or infrastructure comes first to have a kind of service mobility. If I take a country like Ethiopia, I don't think that the huge infrastructure requirement can be managed with maybe a company, individual companies because of country's hugeness. So what I can say is choose like, is there a demand? If there is highly demand, I suggest flourish the service. So work on content development and service development, outlets. If there is no demand, you need to have infrastructure so as demand will be created by supply and the supply and demand strategy. So I think that's what the government has been trying to invest in most of the infrastructure development in Ethiopia. Just like you have infrastructure, highway, and every railway, something, maybe the government might have taken some of kind of analytical studies, but I don't think that. But we have to drive first the infrastructure. And just likewise, I'm recommending the Ethiopian government establish, there should be a very uh, robust digital infrastructure, and then the demand will be driven by that infrastructure. So for Ethiopia, for a country like Ethiopia, I prefer, in my view, is a supply-driven strategy, whereby infrastructure comes first and the service is expected from that. But the countries like many other countries who are more having service outlet, okay, that will be just develop the service, and then the service by itself demands the individual companies to have more infrastructure, and then until the equilibrium comes. So the thing is, in a system, particularly in a digital ecosystem, demand and supply should be in an equilibrium point. The, the net effect of the two parameters should be zero. That means the business is going well in the very promising business. Otherwise, if demand increase, it means there is no infrastructure and there is no one there is no an ecosystem, or there is no platform whereby service can be driven. If the supply is taking part, there is no service, there is no demand. So we have to take some of a kind of equilibrium point, or the equivalent point, or just the first derivative of some equation, so as all the demand and the service are at equilibrium point. I'm sure, as I said, it depends to country to country. It depends to business type to business type. Like, as I said, other countries, maybe some of the very developed countries in East Asian countries, maybe may not be thinking of about infrastructure because the infrastructure has already been built either by the government or the private sector. By the time they should to think of what kind of service outlet should they to boost, to have the demand and supply are in an equilibrium point. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Jalali, would you like to sum up with some of your own takeaways, some of your own observations on this topic of connected Ethiopia?
Actually, I'm a bit far away from the digital world, but I'm an economist, so I'll try to give an overview from the economic side. So I think digital connectivity is shaping the world globally and in wide aspects, right? So as an Ethiopian, we have to work on factors that we have to focus on the connectivity, aligning it with the economic factors that we need to give our emphasis on it, and then that's it. Thank you.
Great, thanks. A big round of applause, please, for a panelist, Jalila, Tishoma, and Tilahun. Will you please come up for a group photograph? And we move on to our next panel after this. Thank you all so much. Please come up here for a photograph. So we just heard some very interesting discussions here on the duality between education and connectivity.